Welcome everyone to another Domo Technical Adoption Program event. We've been hosting a few of these this month, right up into the end of the month. And then next month, you'll see these coming kind of fast and furious. We recognized very early on, Dan, right, that we probably should do some interactive technical sessions. As we've had a bunch of really cool connection tour events and tons of feedback from the community that are like, we love these, we love these product updates. We love the stuff you're doing in AI. We see all of these really cool examples and use cases of App Studio and workflows and task centers and how to use forms. And unfortunately, we've not done a good job in the community of providing sessions that focus on technical adoption. So here we are, almost to the end of the year, but we're going to, a renewed effort in a lot of these as we move into next year as well. And we can't thank Dan's team enough. Director of Product Enablement there at Domo, doing all of great things with some people like Adam Lanefeld and some other folks. We had Riley on yesterday to talk AI. Just a really cool series that we're going to start doing. We hope to do 2 a month. I think that's what we've kind of committed to, Dan. I want to put words in your mouth, but fingers crossed, as long as everything works the way it should. We'll try to get these done in 2 a month. I'm not going to take up a lot of time today because I want Dan to get to the meat and potatoes of what we're presenting. And that is App Studio, workflows, some data triggers. This is really going to be a hands-on event. We want you to kind of walk through the product with us. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, please use the chat section. It's really the only way we have to communicate with everybody across lots of social media platforms. And thank you to Arbor Rose on our community for being here as well. Appreciate you. Hello to you. If you're joining us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, not Twitter X, because apparently they've changed some things. It is now a little bit of a pay to play situation on Twitter X. Because we don't pay for premium services, it looks like we may not be streaming there today. Unfortunately, is life. So we'll move on without Twitter today and hopefully get that fixed next time. That way we're continuing to stream across all of those platforms. Or if you stumbled upon a registration page on StreamYard and you're joining us there, thank you, thank you, thank you. Michael, right off the bat, before we get started, any news on privately embedding apps? Question mark.
Yeah, shoot me a note. I don't want to derail us today, but sure. We can have a good chat about it. I think you'll like where we're at.
I love it. I love it. All right. So super excited. Kelly says Cameron's vision coming to life. Lots of fun
Cam.
stuff. Heart hands to Cam and Kelly. Thank you guys so much. Day 3, Kelly. Yes, day 3 of Domo webinars and live streams and events. And we couldn't be more thankful for you guys to continue to join us. The expert here is Dan on all things. So we're going to turn it over to him, let him roll. We've got some links to share with you so you can follow along and insert data sets as he kind of walks you through what this looks like. But Dan, it looks like another beautiful day in Utah. We're dark and gloomy here in Indiana. We're getting rain for the first time since Helene, it looks like, but it was much needed. It was much needed. I felt like we were in Dune at some point here in the Midwest. It was just dust, dirt, and wind. So pretty struggling here for quite some time. So I welcome the rain, but I would love a little sunshine every once in a while. All right, Dan, it's your show. We're just living in it. So take it away.
Hey, Eddie, I appreciate it. Like Eddie said, with this technical adoption program, we're going to be coming at you with kind of some new content, right? Where we're going to be all focused around helping you solve discrete business problems as opposed to just focused on a core piece of technology, which is similar to what we did yesterday. Eddie, if you wouldn't mind throwing that link up, I want you guys, this is a hands-on thing. We're going to walk through together and we're going to build some stuff. And in order to do that, I've got a data set that I want you to download. It's a small one. It's like 757 rows or something like that. But if you could, click that link, download that CSV, and get it in your instance while we're kind of getting things teed up here. But let me share out my screen. It's going to work this time. I know it. And here we go. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to take action on a data event. And in this example, we're going to use employee onboarding. Like I said, hands-on workshop. We're going to go out and build some stuff. Important for you to understand, though, I realize you may not be involved in employee onboarding. These are common patterns that I promise will be applicable to your business in one fashion or another. So please follow along, trust the process. I think you'll like what we've got. But the solution that we're going to build today is around the business challenge of you got lots of challenges associated with onboarding a new employee, right? There's a lot of people involved, a lot of different processes that all need to occur in the correct order. And so we're going to build out a solution that leverages a lot of pieces of the Domo platform. We're going to start with either an alert or a form fill, and that's going to kick off a process that involves workflows, App Studio, Task Center, and forms, where all of those actions can be taken, both programmatic actions and human-in-the-loop activities, where we've got people that need to perform specific tasks. So with that little bit of background out of the way, I'm going to stop sharing that screen. We're going to share out this one, and I'll give you a little demo of what we're going to build real quick. Here we go. So here is my people management app, right? And this is a place in Domo where I can come in and I can see the details about our employees. I can come find specifics on a given employee and see which space they're in. I can look at my office space and understand what my vacancies look like across the campus. But what I want to really focus on is this employee onboarding page, which has a couple of tabs, one for outstanding onboarding tasks and one for employee intake. Let's say that we're getting ready to hire a new employee. And we'll say that it's my friend Dan Roden. And Dan's going to start on November 8th. He's going to work for Ryan Bates, and he's going to work in the headquarters building. So as soon as I kick that off, right, there's a number of activities that need to happen as it relates to creating this new person, right? So if we come over here, we can see already right out of the gate, that first task is to create an employee ID and an email for Dan. And we can say that his email address is dan.roden@fakeemail.com. And here's his employee ID, which is then going to kick off another chain of subsequent processes. You can see them flying in here where based on the facility I indicated Dan's going to work out of, we need to create him a key card ID. Go ahead and have that be 1111. And it looks like, again, based on the facility that he's going to work out of, he needs a parking pass, right? So we'll go ahead and assign him a parking pass ID, excuse me. And in addition to those activities that we took, there's also some programmatic things that happen behind the scenes. If we come over here and look at the admin section under people, we can see we've got a new user, dan.roden@fakeemail.com, that was created just right now. So that's the solution that we're going to build. We're going to jump in. We're going to knock it out in the next hour. And I want you to follow along, and I think you'll be impressed with how quickly this comes together. And the idea is that this is going to serve as a foundational building block for a really cool and robust process that you're going to build out. We're going to get the scaffolding and a few pieces in today. But the first thing you got to do is make sure we've got this employee onboarding data set. All right, so it's 757 rows, it's 12 columns, looks like this. If you're having any issues getting access to that data set, it'll be important as we run through this so that we know we're all working off of known data. But essentially what this is an export of a view that joined up a bunch of tables from our fictitious database of job codes and building codes and employee roster and whatnot. So once we got that data set uploaded, give it a name. I called mine employee onboarding data. We're going to jump into this more menu, and we're going to start with workflows. Now, if workflows is not on for you, workflows is a feature that's enabled for all of our consumption-based customers. It's also available for non-consumption-based customers, but may need to be turned on for you. So if it's not there, follow along. We'll reach out to your CSM. We can get that feature turned on for you. But let's hit new workflow, and we're going to build a blank workflow. I'm going to give this a name. We'll call this live training employee onboarding. You can call it whatever suits your fancy. Now, I'm going to give this a version 0.0.1. There's a whole science around versioning and when to choose what numbers and whatnot. But the one thing we know is that we're starting with the very first iteration. So 0.0.1 feels appropriate. And I'm going to put a description in here that this is the workflow we're building during the webinar. You can put whatever description you want in here if you want to. But once I hit save, you can see it brings me into this workflow canvas. And if you're new to workflows, follow along. Toward the end, I'll point you to some assets where we can do some deep dives on the particular components, but we'll guide you through what we're doing here today. The first thing I'm going to have you do is click on General Start. Now, just by quick way of explanation, the two methods we have to start these processes are either a timer, which is something that occurs on a known cadence, right? Every day, every week, every month, every minute, something like that. A general start is anything that's invoked through some sort of outside influence, right? An alert, submission of a form, an API call. General starts are used very frequently. So we're going to go ahead and hit that General Start button. And as we do that, you'll notice that over here in this right-hand rail, we got a configuration pane. We're going to ignore that for now. But more importantly, it gave us this menu here with a plus and an arrow key and the ability to start creating some steps in our process, right? So the process we're going to build out today is going to mirror that one that I just showed you in our little demo. And so I'm going to have you hit this plus button, and that adds a new step to your workflow. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to get all our processes down on this canvas, right? We're not going to actually worry about making them do anything just yet. So I'm going to double click on that rectangle that just created there, and I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to call it Create Employee ID and Email. That was that action you saw me take right out of the gate when I created an email and an employee ID for Dan. It's kind of the very first step we're going to take when we onboard somebody. Now, after that, we're going to hit that plus button again, and this time we're going to leverage a flow control. So I am going to have you click flow controls, and I'll explain why. We're gonna add a parallel logic flow control. What flow controls do is they allow you to dictate different pathing that your workflow can take. And the reason we're going to use parallel logic is because we want a few things to happen in parallel, right? We want them to all happen at the same time, not necessarily one after the other. So we're going to add that parallel logic, and we're going to give it a name, perform tasks. We can call it whatever we want to. It's really just serving as a gateway to send our process flow down a variety of different paths. The three that we're going to worry about are if they need a parking pass, what kind of access type they need, and then we're going to have a programmatic action of creating the Domo user for them. And we'll talk through each of those. But I'm going to come to this perform task step. I'm going to come out the right-hand side with a plus, and I'm going to say here we want to create the key card, right? So we're going to create a key card. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to have it create the parking pass. Now I'm going to just scoot this over here to get some style points. You can drag these items around. And back at this parallel gateway, I'm going to hit this plus tab. I'm going to slide this down here, and I'm going to create their Domo user. Right, so those are three things that I want to do simultaneously. And then after that, we'll call our workflow complete. So after this create Domo user, I'm going to we'll have this one be a flow control, and we're going to use this end shape. We're just going to call this workflow complete. End shapes, all your workflows need to resolve to an end shape, right? That lets us know that There's not any more tasks or anything to perform. So we've got our different steps that we're going to perform laid out here. Now, you're probably thinking there's some nuance around all of this, right? Every employee doesn't need a key card, right? If you looked at our data set, some need a key fob, some need a key card, and not every employee needs a parking pass, right? Only employees at certain facilities do. So I'm actually going to have you click this three-dot menu. We're going to add a flow control here in place of create key card. We're going to add a conditional logic one, right? We're going to do the same thing for parking pass. We're going to click on there. We're going to assign that to a flow control, and we're going to select conditional logic. Just like we saw with our parallel gateway here, we've now got the ability to have multiple paths out of our step here. So I'm going to now come out the right-hand side of create key card. I'm going to click on this white space, and you'll see that it actually added a condition name and a step. So I'm going to call this condition name yes, right? This is the path I wanted to go down. If they need a key card, I'm going to call this create key card. So I'm actually going to rename our step here is key card required. You don't need to do that. Just going to earn some style points there. I'm going to do the same for our parking pass. Is parking pass required? All right. Zoom out a little bit here. And just like we did for this key card, I'm going to come off the right-hand side. I'm going to call this condition yes. And I'm going to have this step be create parking pass. All right. So our process flow now is looking more complete, right? Now, I mentioned that we're going to build some basics, some scaffolding. You're going to have a much different process for onboarding employees or taking action on your data-driven event. What I'm trying to do here today is check all the boxes and cover all the bases of making sure that things happen procedurally. We're going to have some human-in-the-loop activities and some programmatic actions, and really just serve as a good introduction for a process that you can build upon. So now that we've kind of got our process laid out here, more or less, I'm going to circle back up to this very first step, which is what we call the start shape or the start step. And we're going to focus now on this configuration pane over here on the right. And here's where we're going to build that little form that you saw me fill out, right? I'm going to have you click this green Customize Start Form button, and you'll get a modal that pops up here for a new form. I'm going to call this Employee Intake Form. You can call it whatever you want to. We're going to put a description here just because it looks kind of nice. Please use this form when onboarding a new employee. Again, you can put something more meaningful there later. We're just putting something together. But let's start to build out our form, right? So we're going to add a question. And in this untitled field, we'll say, what is the employee's name? I'm going to add a description here that says, please include just their first and last name. That's the process we want. You can see we've got a variety of different ways that we can allow that question to be answered. I'm going to leave this with short answer. We'll show you some of these different varieties as we work our way through the project today. And this is going to be text, right? We can have a variety of different input types. We're going to run with text, right? We're going to type out someone's name. So we now have this employee intake or employee name question, and we're going to add another one, and we're going to ask, who is the hiring manager? Now, we're going to leave this as a short answer, but here, I don't want to have to type out that hiring manager's name. I want to be able to select from a list of known commodities, right? So I'm going to use a different data type or a different entity type. We're going to go with person. And you'll see why as we run through this, but person is the data type we're going to select there. We're going to add a question around their start date. Here, we're going to change short answer to date time. And we're going to make sure that we've got date selected, right? That's going to give us that nice date picker that we talked about. And then we're going to add one more field, and we're going to ask which facility are they being hired in? Now, for this one, instead of a short answer, let's go with a single choice drop down. We want to put a nice drop down menu. And there's a couple of really cool things that we can do here. We can put some placeholder text. We can start to add some options, but I want to show you how to have these options be driven by a data set, right? We have that data set that's got information on all of our facilities. I don't want to have to come change my form as we get more or less facilities. So over here in the right-hand side, you'll see I've got this field options. And for list options, I'm going to select data set defines. I'm going to choose that employee onboarding data set. For the column, I'm going to go with building name. Right, so that's now going to present a drop-down menu, just like you saw, that'll be populated with all the distinct values in my employee onboarding data building name column. I'm going to hit this little preview button here, and we can see exactly what our form looks like. Looks pretty good, right? We can see we can search through our users. We've got our field for name. Our date picker looks nice. And this option will display once this thing is mapped. So our form is looking pretty good. There's a couple of things that we want to double check here really quick. We want to make sure that we're providing an output on each of these questions, which is done by default. We'll share more about inputs, read-only, and outputs here in a moment, but we want to make sure they're providing outputs. And then we want to make sure that we're mapping all of our inputs to variables, right? So I'm going to click on this, what is the employee's name? We can see it's created a start parameter, right? It's something our workflow needs. And we're going to hit create variable and map. Now, what this does is this creates a variable. It mirrors the name of the question. So what is the employee's name? I'm going to have you do that for each one of our questions. So we're going to do it for the hiring manager. We're going to do it for the start date. And we're going to do it for what facility they're being hired in. We're going to hit create variable and map on each of those. So we've created a fairly simple form. And let me explain what we just did with that create variable and map step. I'm going to hit save. And you can see we got a message, our form saved successfully. And over here on the right-hand side, we can see we've got these start parameters. Start parameters are things that your workflow needs in order to run. Without those start parameters, your workflow can't do anything. And the values that are passed in as that start parameter are going to get stored in these variables. We can see now we've got a variable list with the 4 variables that we just created. What is the employee name? Who's the hiring manager? What is the start date? And which facility are they being hired to work in? Variables are how data passes through different steps in your workflow. So it's important you understand those. We've got a whole section in the knowledge base on variables that we'll point you to after we get done today. But that's what we've done is we've effectively taken the inputs and we've stored them in these 4 variables to be called upon later on in our workflow. Now, one thing about variables, I mentioned it we were kind of hasty as we created that. They followed the name of the question. I want to point out that you can edit these and rename these, right? So I may call this one employee name, just to clean that up. We don't need to go through and do all of them, but I want to make you aware of the ability to do that. And you can see that start parameter is now passed to that employee name variable. Let's move on to our next step. And this is where we have that first human in the loop activity of saying, hey, before we can go, see if they need a key card and create it, see if they need a parking pass and create it, and create their Domo user license, we need to know their employee ID and their email address. What I'm going to have you do is click on the 3 dots on the upper right corner there, and we're going to create what's called a user task. A user task is what we do when we need a person to perform something. User tasks exist in 2 different flavors as of today, email and form. And form is by far the most useful and the one that I think you'll leverage the most. And it's the one that we're going to use here today. When we click form, you'll see it added that little icon there indicating that it's a form user task. And our configuration panel over here on the right-hand side now has the necessary inputs to create and select that or configure that activity. Now, if this is your first time in here, which it very likely may be, you don't have a queue, right? So I'm going to have you hit save, and we're actually going to exit out of our workflow for a minute, and I'm going to introduce you to Task Center. We're going to close that after we hit the save button. You can see now we've got our version. We can see it's not deployed, it's not active, it hasn't been used, but it's there and it's waiting for us. I'm going to have you over on the left-hand side, click on this Task Center icon. This little box and check you see there. The other place that you can access Task Center is from the More menu. It's present there. We also do, for your end users, have a dedicated mobile app for Task Center, which is really great. And I'll encourage you to check that out. But what we want to do here in Task Center, this is where all these human in the loop activities or these tasks get actioned. And the way they get actioned is they fall into a queue. You can create as many different queues as you'd like. We're going to create one for this use case we're building out here today. So I'm going to have you hit Manage Queues up here in the upper right, and yours is likely a blank list here. So we're just going to go ahead and hit New Queue. We'll call this Live Training Employee Onboarding, and we'll give it a description. This is the queue used in the live training. Struggling to type today. So when we create that queue, you'll see it shows up here. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out as it relates to queues. If we click on the 3-dot menu over here on the right-hand side, you can see a little tray pops down. And we've got a few options. One, obviously, we can edit the queue. But I want to talk to you real quickly about permissions. You don't need to click through this step with me, but I do want to explain that queues, like most other assets in Domo, need to be explicitly shared with the different audiences. So you can see here that I am the only one that has access. I'm an admin, and you can see our different users and the different levels of access that we can give to different individuals and groups. So as you're wanting to assign tasks to folks and have it in a queue, you'll want to be thoughtful in how you grant permission to that queue. So just be aware that permissions need to be granted to queues. I also want to call out manage notifications. I mentioned we've got the dedicated Task Center app. That's what this push refers to. You can also get email and text message notifications. If you've been around Domo for a while, you're used to this screen. It exists in a variety of different places where you can determine how you get notified around different activities. So just be aware of that. And then the last important one I want to share with you here is assignee security. This is an important concept to understand. Assignee security, you'll notice that crest. Again, if you've been around for a little while, it's that PDP icon. I would describe assignee security to you as PDP for queues. If we enable assignee security, what that means is that users are only going to see tasks that are assigned to them. You're probably going to want to do this more often than not. It could be assigned to them individually or assigned to them as a group, but that really helps keep the clutter down if you've got high volume of activities. The other thing is this creator access. If we enable creator access, then not only can the assignee or the person assigned to take that action see it, but the person that created it can as well. So in that example that I shared with you at the beginning, in that demo, I was the creator. And in that example, I was actually both the creator and the assignee because it was assigned to me. But let's pretend that I assigned that task to Adam. If I had creator access turned off, I wouldn't be able to see that. Adam would be the only one that could see it. With creator access turned on, both Adam and myself would see that task. So I'm going to go ahead and check both those boxes and hit save. Those are, again, best practices that I think you're going to do. And we can see we've got the warning that assignee security is enabled on the queue. And if we back out to the task center here, you'll be able to see your queue doesn't have any tasks in it yet, but it's here. And we're going to start to populate this with tasks in a moment. With that queue created, I'm going to have you on this left-hand rail jump back into the workflow. We're going to click on our workflow that we were working on, and we're going to click on that version 0.0.1. Just going to bring us back into the workflow where we left off in an edit state, right? We're going to click on that step we were at, the create employee ID and email. And now we're going to select our queue we just created, live training employee onboarding. That's the queue we're going to assign this task to. And now for who we're going to assign it to, right? We could assign it to the hiring manager. To make this, we could leave it unassigned, which means it doesn't go to anybody. To make this demonstrable, I'm going to ask that you do custom value and you assign it to yourself. This is going to allow you to have the whole experience around notifications and whatnot that exists. And you're likely the only user that's there because you're likely the only person that has access to that queue. As more people have access to the queue, you'll be able to choose more people from that list. But assign it to yourself, and let's hit select a form. And I'm going to have you create a new form. So just like we did before, we're going to give this a title. We're going to call this create employee ID and email. Now, this form is going to function a little bit different than the last one we built because the first few things that we want to do is present information to this user, right? For this first field, and I'll show you how we do this. Let's put employee name. And what we want to do here is instead of asking me, the person that's creating the employee ID and email, what their name is, we want to present them with their name. So I'm going to hit this 3-dot menu. I'm going to have you select accepts input and unselect provides output. You'll notice over here on the right-hand side, this changed around a little bit. We'll focus on that more in a moment. But accepts input means that we can pass a value from a variable in here, and it's going to display it, and it's not going to provide anything back to the workflow. I'm going to go ahead and select read-only on this one as well, and I'll show you and explain that to you more in a moment. Accepts input is selected, read-only is selected, and provides output is deselected. Now what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you duplicate that field, and we're going to say the employee start date. And on this one, we're going to make it date time. And here, so you can see what the experience looks like, I'm going to have you uncheck read only, right? So this is going to accept an input. It's going to be editable, and it's not going to provide an output. I promise we'll connect all the dots with this. If your head's spinning a little bit, totally understandable. Just follow along with me. And And now we're going to add our first question, which is, what is this employee's email address, right? So we'll, like we did before, what is this employee's new email address? You can call that whatever you want to. Now here, like we did before, we're going to have this one provide an output. Short answer and text is appropriate. And we're going to add another question for, what is this employee's ID? This employee's employee ID. I don't know why that sounds weird, but we're going to run with it. And I'm going to tell it that I want this one to be a number. You can do whatever you want to there. This is just to get you the experience with the different input types. I'm going to have you toggle this preview button, and you can see that these are values that are going to get set by an input. These are ones that we can key in, right? You can see since this is a number, it'll only let us put integers in here. This text field obviously will allow for anything. I'm going to turn the preview off. And here at this edit form pane, there's a couple of things I want to point out to you. Since we've got two questions that accept inputs, we've got a couple of inputs that we need to map, and we've got a couple of outputs that we need to map. For employee name, I'm going to pass the value that's stored in our employee name variable. If you chose to rename it employee name the same way I did, you'll see there it might be, what is the employee's name? Select the appropriate variable there for both the employee name and the start date. You should only have one variable option there for start date because we've only got one date variable. And then we're going to, just like we did before, we're going to create variable and map for our two outputs. Right, so we're going to create new variables and map those. Now, there's two other things that I want to have you do really quick before we complete this one. One is I'm going to have you select this Make Form Visible in Search box. We're going to reuse some flavor of this for the key card creation and the parking pass creation. So by making this visible in search means we can use it essentially as a template later on. I'm also going to have you click.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
Sorry. I know we don't want to break into a couple of these questions, but I do want to get to Michael's here because I think we missed the other one. But Michael asks, is there a way to pull employee name from my user's data set?
Yeah, Michael, absolutely. So the same way that we, in that initial start task that we pulled in the facilities to choose which facility they're working in, that could exist for any of them. Here, where we're onboarding a new employee, in this example, that employee doesn't exist in our data set yet because we're capturing it as a form input. Now, I will show you when we tie things out at the end how it could be driven from a data set via an alert. But the answer is yes. Any of these can be chosen as pickers from the data set.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate
Sorry,
it.
Eddie. I can't see the questions with the way this is
no
set
worries.
up right now. So feel free to interrupt me as we need to.
As they're coming in, I'll try to get them. Lots of love for you and for workflows, which we'll talk about at the end, but we want you to keep chugging along.
All right. So we just selected this Make Form Visible in Search. I'm going to have you click on this gear for form settings. Now, you'll notice when for time's sake, I won't pull up a messy example, but task identifiers are a really great way to make tasks easy to find for different users. You can choose to do this with me right now or not. I'm going to toggle it on, and I'm going to enter a task identifier, and I'm going to call this create employee ID and email. So I'm going to say what the task is, and I'm going to pass in the employee name variable, right? So that's just going to label this task, create employee ID and email hyphen Adam Landefeld or whoever that new employee is. If you don't do that, it's going to get a randomly generated identifier, which isn't always super helpful. So I want to make that task identifiers known to you, and I'll show you how that surfaces when we get to the appropriate point. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and hit close. And you can see here we've got our form. It's got our inputs and our outputs. We're going to just go ahead and map that output to employee name and start date. I thought I deselected those. Apologies if we didn't. But we've got all of our inputs and outputs mapped. Now, you do need to make sure as we move through here, we'll get to a validation step at the end. Every input and output has to be mapped to something, right? And we'll show you a little bit later on how you can pass some custom values in there. But now that we've done that, we get to our parallel gateway. We're going to go down a few different paths. And the first one is, let's go down this key card required. And if they require a key card, we're going to go ahead and create their key card. Now, you're probably thinking, right, how do we know whether or not they need a key card, right? In our data set, we have information in there that indicates, based on the facility, if key card access is required. So I'm going to have you add a step in here, and we're going to introduce how you interface with Domo data sets inside of a process like this. I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm going to select everything we've got here. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to slide it down just a little bit to create some real estate here. You don't need to do that. I'm just big on style points. I want a little extra space here, and I'm going to click on, you can click on either of these steps, but click on this create employee ID, and you can see now I've got the ability to add a step in between, right? So I'm going to have you hit that plus button. And what we want to do is we want to query that data set to get some metadata around whether or not they need a key card, whether or not they need a parking pass. So I'm going to have you use this query table step, right? We'll just call this data lookup. Can also be configured over here on the right. You can put a little bit more robust description, but this is exactly like it sounds. We're going to query a table. So I'm going to hit this create SQL query button here. And this is our, if you've been using workflows for a while, this is a new shape or a new step that we introduced. We're really excited about it. And we're going to select a data set. If I had a data set variable, I could pass it in here, but I don't. I'm going to choose custom. I'm going to choose a data set, and I'm going to pick that employee onboarding data. You see that's our data set that we've got here. We'll select that, and we're going to hit OK. I'm just going to start to type my query. Select star from data. Let's hit run. And you can see we've got a preview of our data set down here. It returns 757 rows. And we can see that parking pass required. We've got some Y's in here. We've got some N's. And for key card or access type, we've got both key card and key fob as values in there. So what I want to do, though, is I only want to find out what access type and parking pass requirements are for the building name that this employee is hired to work in, right? So we're going to go back to our query, and we're going to add a where clause. I'm going to say where. I'm going to put a little tick mark like you're used to when you select a column name in Domo. We're going to reference that building name column that you see right here, where building underscore name equals, I'm going to put a pair of single quotes, and in between those single quotes where I would type my string, right, I'm going to insert a variable. I'm going to select variable, and I'm going to grab this variable, which is which facility are they being hired to work in. I'm going to insert that, and you can see now the value that we have in that variable, which we captured from our start form, is going to be dynamically injected into our query. I'm going to hit run again, and we're going to get this pop up, and it's asking me, because we don't have a value declared for that variable yet, what do I want it to be? I'm going to type in headquarters building, I can see that's a valid value there. And you can see now we got back 234 results. So my where clause worked. But I know that everybody at the headquarters building, they all have the same access type and the same requirements for parking pass. So I'm going to limit this to just one row. I'm going to add limit 1 to the end of my query here. I'm going to hit run one more time. And you can see I get one row of data back. And over here on the right-hand side, I want to point out that it's defining the output type. There's an object with a lot of children, right? Objects can contain literally anything, including other objects. We're going to go ahead and leave that box checked. I'm going to hit save. So you can see now in our configuration pane, we've got our query here. We're select star from data where building name equals our variable, limit 1. And now we have this long list of outputs that reside inside this object. Just like we've done before, I'm going to hit create variable and map. You'll see over here in my variable list, we've got a new variable called result. And I can click that little drop down and I can see that it's got all of these different children inside of it, right? Which is pretty cool. So now I have the information that I need to understand if they do need a key card and if they do need a parking pass, right? So where those logic rules are applied is actually in the different yes shapes here. So we're gonna go down this is key card required path. We're gonna click on yes, and I'm gonna stipulate the rule that needs to be met in order for the conditional gateway to go down this path, right? So we're going to add a rule, and the variable that we want to evaluate here for the, again, we're on the key card required, is our data list variable, and we want to look at result.access type. That is the value that contained either key card or key fob. I'm going to say if it equals a custom value of key card, right? We're going to go ahead and add that rule. And you can see here saying, hey, if this equals key card, we're going to go down this path. Now, we're keeping this very simple today. You can have as many different or as complicated a logic as you want to determine which path it should go down. Just be aware of that. We're going to keep it really simple and say, hey, if that equals key card, then we want to create their key card. We're going to go to this create key card step now. And just like we did for our create employee ID, this is a task that we need a person to perform. So we're going to hit this 3-dot menu. We're going to define this step. We're going to add a user task, right? This is something a person's doing. We're going to have that be a form. And just like we did before, we're going to drop it in that same queue. I'm going to have you assign it to yourself or leave it unassigned, or you can assign it to the hiring manager. You can really, do whatever you choose. I like assigning it to me to make it demonstrable for now. And when we hit select the form, this time, we're going to copy from our existing form, right? We already did the work of creating most of what we need here. We're going to copy existing form. And you can see our create employee ID and email that we created 9 minutes ago. You likely won't have some of these others here. We're going to go ahead and select that form. It shows us a preview of it. And now we've got that form selected. What I'm going to have you do is edit that form. And you can see that it's called create employee ID and email copy. We're going to call this one create key fob, right? That's our key card, I'm sorry. That's the step that we're performing here. So we don't need an email address. So we're going to go ahead and delete that one. And for what is the employee's ID, we're going to say, what is their key card ID, right? We're going to change that question there. We're going to write that to, we'll create a new variable. We'll write to that. I'll show you a way that we accomplish that. And then I'm just going to hit this back to form overview, and we're going to adjust our task identifier if you did that so that it's create key card. I know we're moving fast. I appreciate you following along. I think you're going to be really happy with what you get done here. We're just going to go ahead and validate that we've got the appropriate selections here. So we want this to accept an input and not provide an output. We the start date, same thing. We want it to accept an input, not provide an output. And key card ID, we want it to only provide an output. Once we've done with that, we can hit save, and we can see now we've got our mappings over here. And we'll go ahead and pass our employee name value, right? That employee name variable in. We'll pass our start date variable in. And for the what is the employee's ID, I'm going to have you take a little different step here so you can see how to do it. We can also build variables over here on the left. So we'll call this key card ID. We'll say that it's a number. And we added a new variable. And now we can choose that newly created variable as where we want to store that output. So having it create the variable in map is always an option. I just wanted to show you that you can also have the approach of building your variable list out over here. So we've created their key card. Now, you're probably also thinking, what if they don't need a key card, right? Our conditional logic gateways allow us to create multiple paths out. So I'm going to click on this, is key card required? And I'm going to hit this plus sign again. And you can see it created another condition, which I'm going to drag over here. And it created another step, which I'll drag over here because our real estate's a little bit tight. If you want to, if you're like me and you're maniacal, you can tidy up your lines a little bit, but we'll call this step no. And if they don't need a key card, we don't really need to do anything. So what I'm actually going to have you do is for this step here, we're just going to put a flow control that is an end step, right? Now, I want to do this for a couple of reasons. We'll say key card complete. Call that whatever we want. I want to have you introduce another end shape here because you should understand that every leg of your workflow or every path it can go down needs to resolve to an end shape. And an end shape doesn't stop the workflow from running. It just concludes that path, right? So when it gets here, if we're still going down other paths, the workflow is going to continue to run. But if a key card is not required, we'll just end, and we'll know that a key card is not required, right? We could create a rule that says, does not equal key card. But what I'm going to do is introduce you to these different configuration types, and instead of putting a rule in here, we're going to make this our default path. Anytime you introduce a flow control like this, you always want to have a default path, which is the path it's going to take if none of your other rules evaluate to true, right? So in this case, it's going to say, hey, does this variable equal key card? Yes, it goes down here. If not, it's going to take our default path of no, and we're going to end. Now, as we added that end shape, I explained to you that every leg of a workflow needs to resolve to an end shape. Once this user task is completed, this needs to move somewhere. So I'm actually going to resolve it to this same end shape. I'm going to have you hit this arrow, which allows us to connect it to other steps in our workflow. And you can see that now, once that's complete, it resolves to that same end step. Perfect. Now, if you want to, you can follow along with me on the parking pass. I'm going to motor through this one just a little bit for time's sake. Or, you know, we'll remove that guy. You understand the process. We're taking a little bit more time than I intended, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete those 2 steps. But we would follow that same process for the parking pass. Now, the other thing I mentioned that I wanted us to do is take a programmatic action, right? Everything we've done up to this point has involved having a human perform a task. Well, let's talk about performing an automated action. We're going to hit this 3-dot menu, and everything that we haven't looked at down here are automated functions that we can take inside of Domo or in external systems, right? Now, the very cool thing here, we'll just hit on this real briefly, is that this is powered by CodeEngine. CodeEngine can interface with any API, and we can write programmatic actions that function against any system out there. So if we want to create a user in Workday, we want to add them to UltiPro, anything like that we want to do, we can. To keep this simple today, we're going to just do a Domo automated function. I'm going to have you hit View More, and let's just search for user here at the top. You can see we've got a few packages. We're going to focus on this Domo users package. We can see we've got a whole host of functions, 13 of them to be exact, inside here. The one we want is create user. We want to create their Domo user account. So we're going to hit create user. This is telling us the inputs and outputs that it's going to provide. We're going to hit add automation. With that done, just like we did with our user tasks, you can see now over on the right-hand side, we've got some parameters and mappings to do. I'm going to pass the employee name in, his full name. I'm going to pass the email address. What is this employee's new email address? In is their email. Now, role ID, I'm going to have you hit custom. I'm going to have you put in the number 4. And let me explain that to you really quick. I'm going to open a new tab here. And what we just did is as you, and don't follow along with this, just let me explain it to you. If you look at the different roles that exist in your Domo environment, we can see that a participant is role ID 4, and admin is role ID 1. You extract that out of the URL there. We're going to just hard code a value of 4. When you actually get this built up and implemented the way you need it to for your business, you're likely going to have a dynamic reference or a lookup where you determine which role ID you want them to be and pass that in as a variable. For now, we're just going to roll with 4. For the outputs, like we did before, or output, I should say, we're going to hit create variable and map. And with that, our little workflow here is complete. I'm going to have you hit the save button. You can see all versions are saved, and we're going to validate that we did everything appropriately, right? So we're going to hit the validate button up there, and you can see that we've got some issues, right? We've got 4 informational issues. Now, you're always going to get informational issues. Don't let those really concern you. Those are related to if you have a variable that is not ever used as an input. We're just fine with those. If I hit this little tab over here, I can see that on my create key card step, I've got functions that aren't mapped. So let's go ahead and map that output to employee name and start date. Let's revalidate. All right, we don't have any validation issues now. So I'm going to hit save and deploy. It tells me again about those 4 informational issues. And once I hit deploy, you can see that our workflow went into a view-only state, and we got this play button up here. So we can hit that play button, right? We see our start form, and we could fill that out, and our workflow would run. What I want to show you, though, is how we wrap that up into that really cool app that we had in the beginning, right? So we're going to exit out of our workflow. I'm going to have you navigate over to the apps section. And just like I created my people management app, I'm going to have you create a new app. I'm just going to choose a theme. I like this dark one. And I'm going to just cut right to the punch here and have you go over in this left rail, add action and elements. We introduce those into our app by leveraging the content elements called workflow and queue. So if we drag workflow on here, you can see we get a list of all of the workflows that we have. I'm going to grab this live training employee onboarding, and you can see our form is there. We can go ahead and make that the appropriate height. And I'm going to do the same with queue. I'm going to drop that right below it. And I'm going to select our live training employee onboarding queue. We can see that appears there. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Obviously, you're going to want to give it a title and whatnot, but I want you to have the experience of actually running this thing, right? So let's say we got, Santa Claus is coming. Santa's going to work for me. He's going to start on Christmas Day, and he's going to work at the other office building, right? We hit submit. We can see, man, it's always impressive to me how fast this is. We can see that we had our first task assigned to us here, create employee ID and email for Santa Claus. We can click and take that action. We can do it right here in this queue, or you can do it in the task center, which you can navigate to in those methods that we shared. And I'll let you, I don't need to walk you through the experience of completing that task and all the subsequent ones, but wanted to walk you through that process, right? We did a lot. Eddie, I'm guessing we've got some questions here, but we built out our workflow, right? We got our start form, we wrapped it in App Studio. Oh, there was one other thing that I wanted to hit on really quick. I'm sorry, but I wanted to share how we can tie this into an alert. I think this is an important thing for you to understand, and you can just follow through with me on this one. Let me share out the right bits. What if we, if we have a data set already that our new employees land in, right? We can, instead of having that start form, kick the process off, we can have it powered by data, right? So I'm just going to quickly create a web form. You don't need to do this. I just want you to be aware of its possibilities. And we're going to say that we've got an employee name. We've got a start date. We've got a facility. And we've got a hiring manager. Employee data. What I can do here is we can create alerts. We can say, hey, when a new row is added, right, I want this alert to trigger, and I want that alert to start a workflow, right? And I can actually say, hey, we're going to do our live training workflow, and I can pass our alert values from the data set right into the workflow that way. So if you don't want to leverage that start form, if you've already got data flowing for things like that, for your data-driven action, know that you can tie it to an alert. So I know we went a couple of minutes over. I know we've got some questions here as well, but congratulations. Hopefully that went smoothly for everybody. And you can see how, even if you're not in the employee onboarding space, I think we can draw lots of parallels to different events that occur within your data and actions you want to take. And hopefully that was enjoyable.
Yeah, we had a few comments here. I love John Lee. He uses workflows to give instant access to dashboards, data sets, how to use content. So nice content. And it's so nice that people don't feel lost or overwhelmed when they first see Domo. I love that comment from John. I think it really speaks to the tool itself. Jason, showing lots of love for Dan, obviously, is the best. Love the workflows product. Been using automated email sends based on customer details. Also to provide automated summaries of high volume data, which is really, really cool. There were a few comments throughout, but I think you spoke to a few of them. If there's anybody that didn't get a question answered, please let us know. You're free to email us. Pretty easy to find at Domo. I'm just eddie.small@domo.com. Dan is the same way. El Rito here on YouTube. Thank you so much for putting this info out there. Really appreciate it. And as always, we're very thankful of Dan to be able to do these. We are going to continue these, so be on the lookout. on our community forums, on our events page, as we continue to spin these up. These are technical adoption program series of events where we're going to do hopefully 2 a month, where we're really doing these deep dives, how-tos, walkthroughs to increase adoption and to increase your usage in our tool. Dan, any parting words before we let these fine folks go? I know we're over by 5 minutes, but it's all fun when you're in Domo. So any parting words for the audience?
I just appreciate you spending so much of your day with me today. Hopefully it was helpful, and you can see lots of different areas where it can apply to your business. So if you got feedback, like Eddie said, hit us up. If there's things you want to hear about, you want us to talk about, you can find me in the community too at Dan Hendrickson. But thank you so much for letting us walk you through that data-driven event. And looking forward to the next one. We got a deep roster of stuff we're going to go through with you. So buckle up.
We do. We can't wait. So make sure you're in the community. Make sure you're attached to those notifications in our events calendar. And we can't wait to see you guys on the next one. Thanks again. Thank you, Arbor, for showing up from the community as well. And Dan for being a part of these. Really appreciate it. We'll catch you guys on the next one.